Hello, I'm Pastor Nanette Christofferson, and along with Pastor Steve Talmadge, we offer these short Bible studies on our lectionary readings. Our gospel reading for this week is from John chapter 5, verse 1 through 9. I'm using the alternative gospel reading for this week because I think it has some great lessons in it for us to think about and learn. So let's take a look at this John chapter 5 right away. If you have your Bibles handy, please open them. If not, just follow along on the screen. After this there was a festival of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now in Jerusalem by the sheep gate there is a pool, called in Hebrew Bethsaida, which has 5 porticos. In these lay many invalids, blind, lame, and paralyzed. One man was there who had been ill for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there, and knew that he had been there a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to be made well?" The sick man answered him, "Sir, I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up, and while I am making my way, someone else steps down ahead of me." Jesus said to him, "Stand up, take your mat, and walk." At once the man was made well, and he took up his mat and began to walk. Now that day was Sabbath. So we have Jesus here healing again on the Sabbath, and we know that that always causes problems with the Jewish authorities. So let's take a look at the man who was healed in this story is perhaps Jesus' most reluctant healer and least grateful of all the people Jesus heals in John's Gospel. The setting of the healing is a pool called Bethsaida near the Sheep's Gate in Jerusalem. Lying in the porticos around this pool are many invalids, blind, lame, and paralyzed. The earliest manuscripts of John do not explain why the invalids are there, but later scribes added an explanation that appears in certain manuscripts. According to this explanation, people believed that an angel of the Lord would come and stir the waters, and that whoever was the first to enter the pool after the waters were stirred would be healed of his or her malady. Now it's kind of interesting, a little background on the Pools of Bethsaida. For a long time, scholars thought that this was a mere metaphor of a miracle healing. And later on, it wasn't until archaeological digs in 1964 where they actually uncovered these pools and realized that this was an actual event. It wasn't a metaphor that was representing Jesus. When Jesus sees a man who has been ill for 38 years lying there, he asks him, "Do you want to be made well?" We might expect a resounding yes. Instead, the man offers a complaint. "Sir, I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up, and while I am making my way, someone else steps down ahead of me." Jesus responds to the man's complaint by saying, "Stand up, take your mat, and walk." Immediately, the man is healed and takes up his mat and walks. At the end of verse 9, the narrator adds, "Now that day was a Sabbath." This is where our lectionary reading ends, but the attentive reader or hearer will recognize that this is not the end of the story. As is always the case, Jesus' healing of someone on the Sabbath creates problems. As the story progresses, the man will be confronted by the Jews, that is, the Jewish religious authorities, who tell him that because it is the Sabbath, it is not lawful to carry his mat. The man responds that he is only doing what the man who healed him told him to do. When asked who it was who healed him, the man responded he didn't know. Later, Jesus encounters the healed man in the temple, and then the healed man proceeds to tell the Jewish authorities that it was Jesus who healed him. So the authorities begin to persecute Jesus because he is healed on the Sabbath. When Jesus tells them that he is simply doing the work of his Father, the Jewish authorities all the more want to kill Jesus, because he was not only breaking the Sabbath, but also calling himself God, also calling God his own Father, thereby making himself equal to God. If ever we are tempted to think that God's healing depends on the quality or quantity of a person's faith, this passage is a strong corrective. The man whom Jesus heals shows no sign of faith in Jesus or of gratitude for what Jesus has done for him. When confronted by the religious authorities about carrying his mat on the Sabbath, He deflects blame to the man who healed him, whose name he has not even bothered to learn. And when he meets Jesus again and learns his name, he immediately tells the authorities the identity of the man they seek. Perhaps the man thinks that if the authorities go after Jesus, they will leave him alone. The religious authorities are convinced that Jesus is a sinner because he heals on the Sabbath. From the perspective of John's Gospel, however, unbelief is a fundamental sin. It is rejection of the one sent by God. When Jesus meets the healed man in the temple, he tells him, "See, you have been made well. Do not sin any more, so that nothing worse happens to you." John 5:14. As we look to the man who was healed, he in some ways was blind to the presence of God. The sin that Jesus refers to is the sin of unbelief. There are worse things than being reproached by religious authorities for breaking the Sabbath. The man, though made well, seems blind to power and presence of God and Jesus, and more concerned about his standing with those in positions of earthly power. He wastes no time in reporting Jesus' identity to the authorities, presumably knowing that they will turn their judgment on Jesus. The good that Jesus does is met not with faith or gratitude, but with persecution. Yet Jesus continues doing the life-giving work of his Father, regardless of the consequences. Why this person? Why was this person healed? Especially one that doesn't demonstrate any kind of faith after the healing and who didn't even know who had healed them to begin with. One might wonder why Jesus chose this particular man to heal out of all the invalids around the Pool of Bethsaida. It seems that he could have made a better choice. Yet here we see that the compassion and healing power of Jesus are not reserved only for those who are deserving, for those whose faith is great, and who respond to healing by believing in and following Jesus. Certainly Jesus heals such people too. But here Jesus heals one whose lack of faith leads him to cooperate with those who persecute Jesus, who even seek to kill Jesus. John's Gospel does not answer the question of why certain people are healed and others are not. But this passage makes it clear that healing is not a matter of having enough faith, as if that could be measured, right? That is not how Jesus operates. Clearly, Jesus does not heal for the benefits to himself in gratitude or praise or devotion. He heals people simply because this is the work of the Father. In this passage, we see that Jesus makes God known. After this passage, we see Jesus go on to say, "Very truly I tell you, the Son can do nothing on his own, but only what he sees the Father doing. Indeed, just as the Father raises the dead and gives them life, so also the Son gives life to whomever he wishes." John's Gospel tells us from the beginning that no one has ever seen God. It is God, the only Son, who is close to the Father's heart, who has made him known. The God whom Jesus makes known is a God who does not discriminate in giving good gifts, a God who wills that all may have life and have it abundantly. So let's ask a few questions here to the text, and hopefully you can think about them as this week goes on. In verse 6, Jesus asks, "Do you want to be healed?" Is that question really necessary? What responsibilities come with the healing? How will the one who was healed, their life be changed? What is Jesus really asking through this question? And maybe Christ is asking this: don't you want things to be different? Do you want to be made whole? Do you really want to change? If we look at this miracle as probably one of many, why did this one get recorded? What makes this particular healing miracle different from the others? Well, as I look to that question, I think that this healing, as the commentator Elizabeth Johnson points out, that obviously this person didn't even know who Jesus was, and that this person really wanted to please the Jewish authorities more than God himself. I think there's a lot of lessons in that. It shows us that God acts in surprising ways to people we would least expect it. And I think that's a really valuable lesson for us who find it easy to judge and want to put limits on who God will heal, and we can't do that. And last and final question. Jesus noticed those who needed to be healed. Who do you need to notice? And I think that that's another great question of who do we need to notice that needs healing, that needs a prayer, that needs something? And are we noticing? Are we even looking for that? Well, I hope this week you have an opportunity to stop and think about this gospel reading a little bit and some of these questions and how God is working in your life. God's blessings to you this week, and see you on Sunday.